Hello, everybody. This is your Aids to Scouting weekly podcast. We're in September the 17th of 2025. This is about our 8th episode. And we have tonight a friend of mine named John Monds. Smile, John. There we go. John, I've known him for years. I was a member of the Libertarian Party, and John was our candidate for governor in '08, wasn't it? 2008?
Yeah,
Or was it
08.
08? And then also in that year, I believe, John, you went to the Libertarian Party National Convention that year. Was it that year or was it before that?
Well, I've been to several,
You knew my son, Alex, though. And at any rate, John and I have been friends for years, and he was a very outstanding candidate. He was obviously I think, the best candidate in the gubernatorial race here in Georgia. And he believed in personal responsibility and freedom and limited government. And but John's also got a background in scouting, and he's going to tell us about that. First, John, you went to college at Morehouse, is that correct?
Yes.
And then what was your major there?
Banking and finance.
All right. And I believe your wife is an educator, is that correct?
She is. Yeah, she's a professor at Albany State.
A professor where?
Albany State University.
At Albany State. And what does she teach?
Business in the business department, computer classes, database, things like that. MIS classes.
And y'all have how many children?
Well, 4 children. They're all grown now, pretty much.
Yeah, I understand. And so tell me about your scouting background before we talk about your children's scouting background.
All right. Like I say, it was pretty brief. I was born in Detroit, Michigan, and that's where I joined scouting. Never really advanced very far. I'm not even sure if I got past just being a regular scout. Did maybe a year or so of Cub Scouts, and then went on to be a Boy Scout. But I think part of the reason of that was we were a church-based troop, but it wasn't a very organized troop in some ways. Not like the one that my sons have been involved in. So that was one aspect of my short scouting career. Another aspect was, I actually started getting into sports when I was about 12, 13. And that really took up a lot of my time. And that was my focus because I really enjoyed playing basketball, number one, but also ran a little track and played football. So, they kind of took over, my activities. And I was just thinking back, I'm not sure if they did that in the South, but up there we used to do fundraisers, and I forget the name of it, but it was a big box that you would carry around in the neighborhood door to door trying to sell stuff, out of this big box, little, trinkets and stuff like that. I have to ask my brother about it. And I hated that. I hated going door to door, begging for support to, please buy my stuff. So that was definitely something that deterred me. Uh, so yeah, my career in scouting was pretty brief.
I was a Cub Scout. Our pack raised money by selling grass seed, ryegrass in the fall. People used to overseed their yards, and for 2 years in a row, I sold as much as I was at the top salesman of the troop. My father believed in us getting out and selling stuff. He made it. I mean, we knocked cold doors and all that a lot. I did, and one year I won a 22 automatic rifle, which I still have. And I just think in this day and age, I'm not sure if very many scouts or any other groups give children automatic 22s. But so I still have that rifle, and I'm still proud of that. But now tell me about your sons and their involvement in scouting.
Well, when we moved down here to South Georgia, um, they were pretty young, so they didn't get into scouting immediately. But after several years, they were homeschooled all the way through high school. So we were looking for different activities for them to be involved in, so they have a little chance to interact with other kids, and me having a little bit of a background in scouting, and also my wife, I think she did brownies and Girl Scouts when she grew up. So we searched out a local scout troop, and they got in. My boys started, I think, right about senior Webelos, uh, and then went all the way through Eagle Scout. And then my youngest son started as a Tiger Cub, and went all the way up through Cub Scouts, all the way through Eagle Scout. And my daughter is actually a Girl Scout Gold awardee, so that's the highest level that was in Girl Scouts.
Well, it sounds, when you talked about homeschooling, um, I rather have this feeling that maybe it's my prejudice that children that are in schools need scouting so they have the kind of skills and experiences that schools don't offer. I mean, not many schools have archery and marksmanship and canoeing and life saving and all those things that are present and available and pushed in the scouting movement, not to mention leadership. You mentioned before we got on, you started talking a little bit about leadership. What was your experience with your children and their leadership responsibilities?
I thought it served them well. In scouting, at a young age, you can become you have different offices as far as being a leader. Whether you're the scribe or you're the patrol leader, assistant patrol leader, and you're given various responsibilities. And all of my kids kind of, had various offices that they had, and duties, and you learn responsibility. So I thought it was great for them to learn, different leadership skills where you learn how to plan a menu for your patrol when you're out camping, and things like that. And I think it still serves them to this day.
What about preparation for higher education? I believe all of your kids went to college, didn't they?
Yeah, the oldest three have already graduated. They're in their careers, and then my youngest son right now is a senior at Morehouse. Um, you have to, plan. You have to, once again, they did a lot of camping. That's what one thing I liked about their troop was not only they did local camping, they did canoeing and things like that, but they did a lot of high adventure. So when you're involved in those various activities, I mean, you have to plan. You have to, um, a lot of those events were say 8, 9 months out. So you have to do things along the way to prepare yourself for activities like that. When you go camping, how do you pack your pack, and what do you take, and if you're hiking, you don't want to overdo it, and things like that. So yeah, they learned a lot of real life skills um, that I think will serve them, from here on out.
Did you participate as an adult leader in any of these fat things during the years?
I did. I wasn't, too hands on. So I wanted to be able to give my boys a little bit of space. Not necessarily always be around them, but I would attend most of the meetings, and also some of the most of the campouts. I think my wife may have only gone on one or two campouts with our younger son. So most of the campouts I was there. Most of the hikes, I did the AT with them. Just about every year for several years, and so one of the highlights, I did go on one high adventure trip with them down to the Keys, and
That's
man,
for those that don't know, and I'm hoping that people all around the world will look at this, and people all around America will be looking. When we say high adventure, we're talking in that case called the Sea Base, and it's a thing that the Scouts have, and of course down at the Keys. And then there's of course Philmont, and then I believe one of your sons was on the staff up at the Northern Tier, which I haven't been up there, but Elliott has been, and and that I'm sure that's just a great experience that he uh, is proud of, that your son's proud of.
Yeah, absolutely. So I did go on the one down at Sea Base, and this was, and they have various trips. This one was they crewed a 72-foot schooner, and they were the crew. Um, so they did everything on the boat. They had various responsibilities, but I think I may have gotten as much from the trip as they did. I mean, it was beautiful being out there on the water, um, doing some snorkeling and things like that. And I had a blast. I know for sure. But and they did go. The older boys did the Triple Crown, where they went to Philmont and Northern Tier. I did not. I didn't make those trips, but we would do some local ones. Like I say, the AT. They go down to Wildwood down in Florida. I made some of those trips, but yeah, I mean, it was a great experience. Since I didn't get that in my scouting journey, so it was kind of great to be able to share some of those things with them.
Some parts of me feel that scouting provides more than formal education does. Uh, it's Now, of course, y'all homeschooled, and so that's a different situation because you can make sure that they get what they really need in a homeschool situation. And I like your idea about how the you homeschoolers can turn to scouts just like they turn to a lot of available activities, zoos and planetariums and things like that, to make sure their children get a well-rounded view of life and the educational possibilities involved. But anyway, so keep on. Tell us a little more about uh, anything you want to talk about. I, John and I, Elliot and listeners, John and I have been friends for years, and he's even come to my club up in Atlanta, and hoping he's going to come back again. And and he's real proud of his Morehouse connections. So, uh, what about John? If you've heard about, what do you think about the scouts taking girls in? Do you think that was a good idea for Scouting America or not?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think that I guess I'm one that I like traditional things. I'm kind of a lot of times I get stuck in my ways. I like things being the same. So um I see why they may have done it, and I think part of the reason why was all this litigation and this we call it political correctness, and I think a lot of the leadership, in my opinion, kind of it was a response to some of what was going on in the culture. But I for me, I don't see why um, the Girl Scouts that they had their own program, you know. So part of me is saying, why, do you need to change? And then the other part is, well, sometimes change is part of life. So when it happens, how do you address it and how do you deal with it? I know in our troop we had a venture crew, and venture crew had young ladies in that, um, and it seemed to work out pretty well. And I think in our troop there weren't a whole lot, if any, that were just doing scouting and instead of doing venture crew. So we didn't see it, and maybe some of the other troops and like that, they probably may have stayed a little bit more, I guess you call traditional. But regardless of my opinion, and that's where it is, and that's what they have to deal with.
Well, I had when I was young, when I was 18, I went to Sweden and was at a scout camp in Sweden. And in those days, they already had girls that were part of it. So, of course, they weren't in the same troop. They were separate units, like we are now in Scouting America, and it always seemed to be the way to go, and to me, and so I was kind of pleased to see the Scouting America do that. But and I'm kind of conservative too in my own ways. But what I want children to be prepared for a difficult, what might turn out to be a very difficult world, and of course those who preceded us in scouting, like in the 1920s and 30s, so many of those people, they had difficulties and they had to be soldiers. And they generally made good soldiers. And of course, West Point and places like that used to rely heavily on scout trained people coming in. So um, that kind of makes me think about bravery. And I was going to ask you first, what do you think about the whole? How big was the troop that your boys were in? Was it a 20 boy troop or 30 or something like that? Or how big?
I would say about between 20 and 30, and had a real good uh, feeder group of Cub Scouts.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so, that I think helped really sustain the troop a lot. Having Cubs, come up through the ranks and then joining the troop. So it was just overall a very strong troop. Had really good leadership. They had really good community support. Um, so I think that really kind of makes a difference, in how well it's run and how well, the kids do is, how strong is the troop, how much support they get. And we were very blessed, to be in the troop that we're in.
That's great. We recently, just this last week, and we thought we'd talk about this some tonight, but just this last week, there was the uh, killing, the assassination, if you call it that, but the killing of Charlie Kirk out in Utah. And I didn't realize that he had been an Eagle Scout. Not that, not that I don't put too high a thing on Eagle. Eagle's great, but at any rate, so he really showed, how a scout is reverent and a scout is brave because he knew that that sort of thing could happen. And I'm just wondering how your community down there in Southwest Georgia has how much kind of feedback and talk y'all have had about that down there.
Not a whole lot. I've kind of brought it up, my circle of friends, just asking, a little bit of their opinions or what they think about it.
Right.
We our paper only comes out once a week down here, so um, I hadn't read it yet. So I'm interested to see if maybe they have an article or something in the paper. So I'll see, what happens there. But I mean, it's to me, when I first heard, my daughter told me about it. She had listened to several of Charlie Kirk's uh, videos and stuff that he had online, and yeah, I was kind of taken aback. I was surprised for one, and saddened, that we're, in this place where somebody such as him, who, uh, what I liked about him, I didn't watch a lot of his stuff, but I like the fact that he was willing to go and debate anybody, um, debate people that didn't agree with them, and listen to them, and actually have a discussion. And if that's the reason that he was assassinated, it's just a sad day for this country.
Well, we had one of our previous podcasts here that Elliott and I did. We talked about communications and communication skills, both making speeches and making other kinds of communications. And so uh, do you think that scouting helps your children develop their communication skills?
Absolutely. I forget which merit badge it was, but they had to get up in front of the troop and speak. That alone is huge for a lot of kids. The fact that it's a nice skill to have to learn to be comfortable in front of people, and they definitely learned that in scouting. Once again, I think my youngest son. I don't think the older boys ever became senior patrol leaders, but my youngest son did. So yeah, I mean, you have to run the meetings and get up and kind of keep everybody on point and things like that. Um, besides scouts, they are also very active in 4-H. So that was
Uh-huh.
another activity that allowed them to learn how to speak in public.
Well, for those in the world who wondered, 4-H stands for what? What does 4-H stand? I know it's agriculturally oriented, but does it mean what does it stand? I don't remember why it's
Tell
called
you in just a
4-H.
moment.
Head, heart, and
Hands and
something.
health.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
There you go.
Well, I've often thought that although I'm very prejudiced about Scouts, thinking it's great, I've always thought that 4-H is awfully good program also because it has a lot of hands-on work and it's not just uh, and 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 it has skills that they talk about and they work at.
I was
Uh,
gonna ask
Yes.
about, a little bit more about your experience with 4-H because I've never done that.
Well, some of the things you mentioned earlier that kids might not get in public schools, like my kids did one DPA, which is District Project Achievement. That was the speaking competition. So they did that at a very young age and went all the way, up through high school. They also did archery. No, yeah, my youngest son did archery one time with 4-H, and it wasn't really for him, but they offered it that you can do archery. They actually had shooting sports, and my youngest son actually was a state champion in trap, um, shooting a 12 gauge shotgun. And so 4-H has a lot of different things. You can do consumer judging. You learn how to go out and look at pricing on different items. They did they learned about trees. How do you go out and identify native trees by their leaves, by the different pines, by their needles, their cones. Um, I thought that was very, very interesting. So 4-H offered a lot of things in a way that scouts do, but scouts I think just takes it into more detail, like with your camping. 4-H camps were more like fun getaways and things like that. But your skills, your cooking skills, you learn that when you camp out, and your physical uh, skills, hiking and things like that that they learn, and being able to push yourself. I think they got a lot out of that as well.
Could
One
you
thing when you say cooking, just a little point here. I always tell the children or scouts that you should cook at home because if you can't cook at home, you darn sure can't cook over a fire. I mean, you can burn stuff and all that, but a lot of people don't think in terms of that. It's sort of like swimming. I tell these kids that can't swim and they're afraid of water. I say at home you should just put your face in the tub or a sink and hold your breath for as long as you can and get over that fear of water. You know how that is with uh, some children are afraid, and it's hard for the people at a camp to overcome that fear in just a 2 or 3 day period. So I tell people prepare, be prepared, and
Yeah.
wanted to ask, when you were as a youth, were you in any other clubs like 4-H or anything like that? Or
No,
like,
I never heard really of 4-H where I grew up north in
where'd you?
and in Michigan. I grew up
Oh,
in
Michigan.
Michigan,
Okay.
and like I say, I was a bit by sports. You know, I love
Okay.
sports, and that's pretty much all I did. I played basketball every
Yeah.
single day, and we had a little hoop in our backyard, and that kind of consumed me from about fourth or fifth grade on up through high
Was
school.
it was it the team sports aspect about it? Is that something that you really liked, or was it just the physical being active part, or was it a bit of both? I guess.
Yeah, I would say both. I just grew up playing in the backyard, and when I went to school, I want to kind of continue, and eventually, I got on a team, that was more like rec league, and then the older you get, it becomes more organized, and I I just played all the time. Love being outdoors. We
Hmm.
even growing up in the city in the
Yeah.
concrete jungle.
Yeah.
Um, we still played a lot outside.
Yeah. What so jumping to a completely different area, what sparked your interest in politics? Or can you remember I mean, because sometimes it just I feel some people just come to it naturally, but sometimes people are inspired by events or people. Was there anything like that for you?
Well, I'll tell the story like this. I'll try to be brief,
Okay,
but
that's okay.
when I was in college, I was active in student government a little bit, freshman, sophomore year. And
Mhm,
then and this is in Atlanta at Morehouse.
mhm,
And I got involved in a state house seat in Georgia. And, my candidate, who I really liked, but the race was so negative. It was basically, even back then in Atlanta, it was two Democrats. Whoever won the uh, the
Primary.
primary would be elected. And
mhm,
in this race, it was so nasty. It was dirty, dirty tricks and all this stuff, and it really turned me off from politics.
mhm.
So from the time when I was about, I would say 19, 20 years old, I didn't want to have anything to do with politics. And what turned me around was after getting married, having my first two kids, you start, I think it changed kind of your perspective on things. And I knew that, politics, affected my family. Decisions that politicians made could be very detrimental. So I decided that I needed to be involved. I needed to try to find a way maybe to make a difference. And part of what I did, and I suggest to anybody, I started from scratch. I would say I was born into the Democratic Party, and that's kind of all I knew. But I wanted to just for myself, figure out what I believed in and who I wanted to support. So when we moved to Georgia back in '99, around 2000, uh, I started looking into the parties. So I actually read all the party platforms, which a lot of people don't do. They just say, well, I'm a Democrat, I'm a Republican, or
Yeah,
whatever.
because
And I
there
actually
needs to be 2 parties.
right, so I read the platforms, and I was already kind of leaning against Democrats and Republicans because we've seen what they've done. We've seen their track records, and to me, it's not impressive at all. But I still looked at their platforms, and what you'll find is, even with them, the things that they say they believe in, they don't do. For example, people think, well, Republicans are fiscally conservative, something like that. Yeah, that's a lie. Democrats care about the people. Yeah, yeah, we see how that's going. So I looked at the Constitution Party. I looked at the Reform Party, which got pretty big in the '90s with Ross Perot. Um, I looked at the Green Party, and I looked at the Libertarian Party. And when I read the Libertarian Party platform, I was hooked. I was like, man, this is what I believe. If you read it to today, it's about freedom. It's about liberty and the things that this country was supposedly founded on. And once I got involved, I stayed involved. I've been kind of with them since about 2004. So about over 20 years, I've been, kind of active in the political realm. But now I think I'm always looking, at what's next, and politics to me. Yeah, I'm kind of done with that phase of my life and looking at doing something else.
Hmm.
I want to say
I
when John was and maybe this isn't the right place to brag about it, but when John was running for governor, there was this talk um, about security on campuses, and so the other two they just, oh well, we got to have more guards or something like that. And John was saying we've got to allow students to carry weapons so they can defend themselves if they need to. And kind of like that was interesting. Uh,
hey, I'm here for it.
I mean, even if you don't agree with it and all that, it's it shows the kind of integrity that John had, the integrity of his beliefs, and of course that whole thing about be prepared, and we have to understand how we have this idea that we're going to have somehow school safe zones, and it makes the schools target zones, target rich environments for armed people if they think they can go to a place where nobody's armed. Nowadays it's things have changed, and
Mm.
like even churches have to feel like they have to have a few people there who are carrying, and so it is what it is. But it's John's not the kind of person that just kids wants to kid himself or kid the voter about uh, what needs to be done, including economics, things like that.
Well, speaking of John and voters, you're one of the people that I've one of the few people I've talked to that has a Wikipedia page, and I did decide to take a peek at it, and it shows that when you ran for the office of Public Service Commission District 1, you received the highest number of votes that a libertarian candidate had ever received in a United States election at any level, until Gary Johnson in the 2012 presidential election. That's pretty impressive there, John. That's really, really impressive because as far as my political standing goes, and I'm a 27-year-old guy. I've lived in Stockbridge, Georgia for my entire life. And I think just based on who I am and what the state of the world, the state of America is, I don't think a two-party system is serving us very well either. And I think we need to let somebody with maybe even the most radical middle ground you can find, if that makes any sense. Do you know what I mean?
It's sad when wanting to be free is considered radical.
Isn't that weird? That's why I say that is because, in order to make a difference like you want to do, uh, it almost has to be a little bit radical, because otherwise people don't really listen to, fair-minded middle ground ideas unless you say them in a crazy way, or if you in a world that seeks a lot of attention very quickly and needs to be satisfied very quickly, uh, it's almost necessary because it does sound a little bit crazy to say all the college students should be armed themselves in today's atmosphere, but back then it was a different atmosphere. It was a different time, and but if we say something like that now, someone is going to listen.
Well, I think
Someone was listening then. Go ahead, John. I interrupted you.
oh, no problem. Yeah, I was just thinking, even it's about having options and choices, and carrying a weapon isn't for everybody, but you ought to have the choice. And even the professors or teachers, like Walker was saying, you create these zones that are basically danger zones, where those who want to do harm to people know where to go, where they're probably not going to have any resistance. and it doesn't make sense. So, I think a lot of our positions as far as libertarianism or just wanting to be free uh, is very logical, which in today's time isn't, like I say, it's not common. But I think we can defend, our position with the best of them. So, yeah, I mean, those things may seem radical, but I guess a lot of people thought, those back in the revolutionary times were radical as well. A lot of people, say, well, Jesus was a radical. He's in the church, going up against the Pharisees and turning over the table in the temple. And sometimes that's what's needed. I mean, you need people that are willing, to one, speak about what they believe in, and two, take action and try to make a difference and change. Like Walker was talking about, being brave. It's brave when you're up against opposition and hatred, and you do what you need to do anyway. Uh, no matter what people say about you or might do to you, you're willing to go all the way for what you believe in, and we need more of that.
Well, that in the scout is brave. It says that the scout has the courage to face danger in spite of fear and to stand up for the right against the coaxings of friends
For
or
the
the
sake
tears
of it
of
being
responsibility.
right.
And so, um, standing up uh, to that coaxings of friends, I think that's one of the things that's going on with this kind of this trans movement stuff. That's especially on the West Coast, where you have this kind of a culture that that that's like out of hand with all this sort of, what do they call it, social contagion, where kids want to be a part of a society, and when the society starts going weird, you know, we need to have our youth understand who they are and to have the bravery to stand up to stand up and not vape because their friends are vaping, and not start smoking for that reason, and not getting tattoos because the other 16-year-olds have talked their parents into it. So I think all that's fundamental. I'm talking too much. John, you're the guest, not me.
No, I don't. I love listening to you, Walker. I mean, we've had these conversations, before, and I always enjoy anytime we get together. So I'm having fun. I enjoy it.
All right, well then let's get together again sometime soon and bring your lovely wife up to the Burns Club, and maybe I can get Elliott in there someday if he's working all the time though. My gosh, he works so much.
Busy guy all the time.
Busy guy.
And well, I'll try to get there sometime this winter when things slow down for me at work. It's easier to skate out early or not go at all.
All right. Well, then, shall we call it an evening, folks? So this has kind of been a short one of our podcasts. And John, you got anything that you'd really like to say about specifically about scouting for people around the world? About we mentioned how scouting is a little bit on the ropes in this country, apparently, but is doing really well in Southeast Asia and Africa, and to a lesser extent in Europe. And so I was just wondering if you have your World Brotherhood uh, thing that you would like to talk about for before we close.
I would just say, well, most of your audience might already know this, but scouting is a great program. Um, I thought it was wonderful, for my kids, and also, being there with them. I got a lot out of it. That, like I said, I didn't get when I was younger. So while it may be under attack a little bit today, hopefully, scouting will, weather the storm and will continue to help kids across the country and around the world, you know hopefully learn to be better citizens, better people, and to treat people kindly, do a good deed every day, and things like that. So I'm hoping that maybe you'll have my son on, as a guest. I've reached out to him, and maybe he could talk a little bit about his experience at High Adventure and what scouting means to him. So I'd love to hear his perspective on what he got out of scouting. And now he's a recent PhD graduate who's teaching college now.
Where is he teaching? Where
Uh,
is he teaching?
he's at Converse University in Spartanburg, South Carolina, in the
Okay.
business department.
All right. All right, son. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. I'll see you when I see you. Okay. Let's break bread together.
Take
Thank you,
care,
Elliott.
Walker. Nice meeting you, Elliott, and I appreciate you having me on. I really
Okay.
enjoyed it. And
All right. Well, we appreciate you coming on.
Yeah,
That's
thanks for
great.
coming.
All right. Good night.